Okay, so ready to dive into some life-saving stuff. Today, it's in-water rescue breathing. We're going deep on a guide for divers, but honestly, even if you've never worn a wetsuit, this info is so key. I mean, pools, lakes, heck, even bathtubs. Knowing what to do if someone's in trouble is huge.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
Accidents can happen so fast, being ready is everything.
No kidding. This guide, it jumps right in. We're talking oxygen, the importance of those ventilations. 5 seconds, bam, 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 got to keep that air flowing. So, like, paint the picture for us. What's happening in those moments when someone's underwater, they can't breathe?
It's like every single cell in their body is screaming for oxygen. The brain especially, those breaths we give, they're the lifeline, keeping things going till we can get them proper help.
And that's where this buoyancy thing comes in, right? I'll admit, the guide made me think about it in a new way.
Buoyancy's more than just bobbing around. In a rescue, it's energy conservation, your most precious resource in the water. It's the difference between struggling to stay afloat and having the strength to help, right? This guide even says, and this one might throw you. Sometimes, if you're wearing weights, keeping them on can actually help.
Whoa, weights on. That's a new one.
Yeah.
Got to be about staying vertical, right?
Bingo. Delivering those rescue breaths when you're like a cork out there, almost impossible. That upright position, it's a game changer.
That's a good point. Counterintuitive, but in a panic, that stability is key. Speaking of which, the guide lays out 3 main methods for in-water rescue breathing, starting with the mouth-to-rescue breathing mask.
Yeah, the rescue mask, that's the gold standard these days. Purpose-built.
And like any tool, it's all about using it right. The guide gets into positioning, making sure there's a good seal, especially in rough water. What sticks out to you there?
Speed is everything, obviously. Get that mask on them, ASAP. But then it's thumbs on the mask, fingers on the jawbone, make sure it's snug, especially if the water's choppy. The guide says, calmer conditions, maybe you sneak in a breath or two before the strap's on all the way. Rough water. Strap first, you don't want to lose that thing.
Adapting to what you're dealing with.
Exactly. Every second counts. But, okay, let's be real. We don't always have a rescue mask just handy. So the guide covers mouth to mouth too. Or mouth to nose, if we need to.
Backup plan for your backup plan. I like it. Even within that, though, there are 2 techniques, right? Do and head cradle. Gotta say, the do, that one's got my attention.
Leverage, that's the key.
Man.
You're in the water with someone who needs your help to breathe. The do, it uses this rolling motion, brings their head closer so you can really give those breaths effectively. Sounds kind of weird, but it works. The guide even says, practice it. Put your hand on their chin, get a feel for where their head needs to be.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, the head cradle, when would that be the go-to?
Think like if you're smaller than the person or their gear makes the do tough. Head cradle gives you more control. Support their head, keep that airway open.
So again, it's about working with the situation, the technique that's going to give you the best shot. We've done the rescue mask, mouth to mouth, but this guide mentions a 3rd method I wasn't as up on, mouth to snorkel.
It's definitely less common now. Rescue masks are everywhere. And, a lot of snorkels these days have that self-draining feature.
Right. Makes this a tad tricky, to say the least. Maybe for those who don't know, what is a self-draining snorkel exactly?
So it's got this valve at the bottom, lets water out when the snorkel's pointed down. Great for regular snorkeling, right?
Yeah.
But for this rescue technique, you'd need one without that.
Makes sense. Even though it's not as common, the guide still covers it. I'm guessing there's still times it might be your only option. Walk us through it.
Sure thing. Start with mouth to mouth, get some air in there. Then, if you need to snorkel, seal around the mouthpiece with your fingers, block the nostrils, and this is crucial. Snorkel tip above water.
Definitely practice this one on dry land first, though.
100%. Now, this part really jumped out at me. The guide's adamant you don't check for a pulse in the water. That feels so counter to everything we know about first aid. What's the thinking there?
It's all about priorities in a water rescue. You're already in a life or death situation, right? Finding a pulse in the water. Tough, even for pros. Takes time, and we don't have that. The guide says, even if you think there's no pulse, you start rescue breathing anyway. Maybe there's a faint heartbeat you can't feel. Better to do something than nothing.
Better safe than sorry, especially when it's like this.
Absolutely. One more thing from the guide, especially for those colder climates.
Yeah.
Neoprene gloves.
Oh, right, yeah. Small detail, big difference. What's the deal there? So neoprene, fantastic for warmth. but it traps water. Last thing we want is that water going into the victim's airway when we're giving breaths. Guide says, good shake of the gloves, get rid of the excess before you make contact.
It's wild, the little things that matter in an emergency. Okay, so we've covered the techniques, but I'm curious for your take on all this. You've got the real-world know-how, the science background. Why do these methods work, and when would you pick one over the other?
Good question. Really, it boils down to this. We're talking about reestablishing an open airway.
Because if they can't breathe, nothing else matters.
Exactly. We're breathing for them, forcing that oxygen in because they can't. Now, which technique? Depends, right? The situation, what equipment you've got, even the person's condition. You give a rescue mask, you're good with it. That's your best bet most of the time.
Designed for it, after all.
Exactly. Good seal makes giving those breaths easier, helps keep the water out. But say you don't have a mask, now you're looking at mouth to mouth, mouth to nose. We talked about the do's a do, good for leverage, especially in calmer water. But the head cradle, that might be easier in tight spaces, or if the person's a lot bigger than you.
Like having different tools in the toolbox, use what works best.
Yeah, good analogy. Right tool for the job. And then there's mouth to snorkel, like we said, less common, but could be a lifesaver.
The one you hope you never need, but man, are you glad you know it if that's all you got. Okay, from the expert to the, well, slightly less expert.
Yeah.
You've been in these situations, the pressure's on. What's the biggest mistake you see people making? When it comes to water rescues, I mean.
You know, it's hesitation more often than not. People freeze up, they panic, that self-doubt creeps in. And listen, I get it. These situations are high stress, but that's exactly why training matters so much. Not just memorizing steps, but that muscle memory, you know? So it's instinct. Because when every second counts, you can't be stuck in your head.
Muscle memory over panic. Love that. Makes total sense. Actually, I was reading this study. It was fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
So it was saying how our brains, under stress, fight or flight mode, they can actually shut down the non-essentials, like complex decision-making. Out the window, we go full instinct. Just shows you, practicing these rescue techniques, it's not just a fun way to spend an afternoon, it's wiring your brain for when it matters.
That's so true. It reminds me of this rescue a few years back. We got called to a lake. Teenager had gone under. Someone saw him struggling, but by the time we got there, he'd been down for a few minutes already.
Oh man, that's scary.
It was. Water was murky, couldn't see anything. But lucky for him, someone there, just a woman who'd taken a basic lifeguarding course years ago. She just jumped in, no hesitation, no panicking, used that do-se-do method we were talking about, and by the time we reached them, she had his head above water, was doing rescue breathing.
Wow, what a badass.
Seriously. And you know what she said afterward? She thought, all those years ago, taking that course, she'd never actually need to use it. But when it happened, it all just came back to her. The techniques, staying calm, everything. You just never know.
Powerful story.
Right.
Really drives home that point that anyone can be a lifesaver. You know, it's not about being some kind of expert. It's about having the knowledge and the guts to act.
That's it. We can all make a difference.
What about someone listening who's thinking, okay, this is all well and good, but I'm not a strong swimmer, I'm not a lifeguard. What can they really do?
I'd say even if you never go near the water, everyone's got a role to play.
How so?
There's this thing in water safety, it's called the chain of survival. Basically, it's all the steps that need to happen to give someone the best chance if they're drowning.
Okay, yeah, I'm listening. What are the links in this chain?
So it starts with prevention, right? Swimming with a buddy, wearing those life jackets, knowing the water you're in. But sometimes, even with all that, things happen. That's where early recognition comes in. You see someone struggling, you call for help immediately.
Because people miss it.
Right.
Don't realize what's happening till it's too late.
Exactly. So even if you can't swim, you're still crucial. You call for help, you get other people's attention, make sure someone's calling 911. Then it's that early rescue breathing, the stuff we've been talking about. And finally, getting them proper medical attention fast.
So it's a team effort, really.
You got it. It really does. And hey, even if you never have to do rescue breathing yourself, just knowing how it works, that chain of survival makes a difference for everyone.
Empowering ourselves,
Yes.
right, with knowledge. And that knowledge, it can literally save a life.
Couldn't agree more.
This deep dive has been incredible. I gotta say, I feel so much more confident knowing these techniques, how important that chain of survival is. But as always, we like to leave folks with something to chew on, you know? Spark some more exploration. What's that final thought, the one you want to leave us with?
So we talked about the how-to, right? The physical steps of in-water rescue breathing. But what about the mental game? How do you Stay calm, stay focused when the pressure's on like that. That's something I'd really encourage everyone to think about, to research.
Because your mental state, that's just as important as the skills themselves when it hits the fan.
100%. The mind, the body, they're connected, right? If your head's not in the game, if you're panicking, those skills we talked about, way harder to access. So how do you train your mind to handle pressure? Meditation, visualization, even just being more aware of how you react to stress.
Yeah.
It all matters.
It's like that saying, train your mind like you train your body, right? So listeners, while you're out there this week, maybe do a little digging on staying mentally sharp under pressure. Heck, maybe even look into some hands-on water safety training. Knowledge is power, and being prepared, that could be the difference between life and death. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.